Hi, my name is Olayinka Fagbemiro, and I'm the NEC for Nigeria. I want to talk about my presentation at this conference, and I would like to share my screen right now. Okay, so I would like to talk about overcoming the challenges of astronomy education in low-tech environment. I'm using Nigeria as a case study, and I'm going to be talking about Nigeria. The educational system in Nigeria uses the 633 system of education, 6334. And what that means is that a child starts school, when a child starts school in Nigeria, the child spends the first 6 years in primary school, goes on to spend another 3 years in junior high, and then another 3 years in senior high, and a minimum of 4 years in tertiary institution. Nigeria has both the private and public schools at every level, and every subject is taught in English language, which is the official language of in Nigeria. The public schools are almost free, but they are mostly poorly funded because there are so many of them, and the government is not just able to keep up with the funding of these very many public schools. So an average public school is lacking in basic facilities such as the internet, electricity, and the most basic sometimes is missing in these public schools. And they are always overcrowded because you have a lot of kids in school in Nigeria. And so, you have a shortage of schools for all the children that should be in school. And by the way, there are 13.2 million school kids who are out of school. So these are kids that don't even attend any public schools at all. The curriculum in Nigeria is developed by the central government, that's the federal government, and this has made it very difficult to introduce astronomy as a subject at the elementary and high school levels because the states do not have an input in curriculum at these levels of education in Nigeria, which is very sad because even when some states are showing interest in introducing astronomy in their curriculum, it's just not so possible because they have to wait for the central government to come up with a curriculum. So what that means is that there is no curriculum for astronomy at these levels. Most astronomy topics, however, are found in subjects, STEM subjects such as physics, mathematics, geography, elementary and basic science, and the likes. And kids encounter topics in astronomy from as early as basic 1. That means they are year 1 in elementary school. They are taught subjects, topics such as day and night, maybe a mention of solar system by the time they are getting to year basic 2 to 3 and 4. And by the first year of secondary school, they're already learning about the International Space Station, they are learning about the atmosphere, the troposphere, and the likes. And so aside the few topics that are taught in this subject, there is the sad possibility that a child may go through the levels of education without coming across astronomy outside of the classroom. And we have statistics that have shown that an average child in Nigeria has less than half chance of seeing a telescope from childhood to adulthood, and even an almost zero chance of looking through one. So that means that a child may never be able to have access to a telescope all through their education in Nigeria. And so there are a lot of challenges with astronomy education in Nigeria as a low-tech environment. There are a lot of overwhelming challenges. And these are what I will briefly talk about before I go into how we've been able to, how we're trying to overcome these challenges, because it would be wrong to say we have been able to overcome that. The challenges are still very much there. We're only making efforts to see how we can mitigate some of them. There is a problem of poor infrastructure, and this means many schools, especially the public schools that I talked about, they lack the most basic infrastructure to support any sort of teaching of astronomy. You know, when you don't have internet access in the school, for example, you don't even have electricity, you don't have computer. The schools, most of them don't even have one single computer. So that means it's almost practically impossible for a school to say, okay, you know what, we want to, even though we don't have astronomy as part of our subject in the curriculum, we want to start something in astronomy. The pictures that are showing on my slide is, there are pictures of some of the dilapidated state of these schools, especially the ones from the northeastern part of Nigeria, the part which have been ravaged by the insurgency. So this insurgency has left most of the public schools in this shape that you see. So, you know, the kids barely have a place to sit. The buildings are so dilapidated that electricity is the least thing you could even think about. So with this kind of state, it's almost impossible. It is impossible to teach astronomy. Also, we have an acute shortage of astronomy experts in Nigeria. Nigeria, with a growing population of almost 200 million people, have over 20% of that population who are in school. And then the number of professional and amateur astronomers in Nigeria are less than 1,000. That means you have less than 1,000 astronomers to a population of almost, you know, or more than 40 million kids. That is very, very crazy. You know, there is just no way to go around that. And so what has happened in the past, and what happens is, when we have astronomy outreach, for example, and we're making an effort to teach kids because they don't get to learn astronomy in school. So Astronomy Without Borders, which is an organization that I founded in Nigeria, we go out to schools to teach astronomy to them as part of their extracurricular activities. And then you see situations whereby you have a very, the ratio of astronomers to students is just so terrible. These pictures, for example, this picture you are seeing on my screen, for example, will show, shows at this particular outreach that we had, we were 8 personnel, and we had over 2,000 pupils. Yes, over 2,000. The hall couldn't even contain all of them, and they are all interested in astronomy. Even when we told the school, you know what, we are just 8. So how about we have about maybe say 100 or to 200 kids attend this event? The school said no, they will allow every child who has signified interest in joining the astronomy program to be a part. And we ended up being extremely overwhelmed because we just couldn't, it was just impossible to have an effective program. From the hall, you see there were a lot of them. And this is how an average public school in Nigeria is. You know, you have this many students in one school. And so whatever facility that is available is not just going to be enough to cater to the huge population of kids in those schools. Also, there is a problem we have with not having enough teaching aids. For example, you want to, you know, astronomy is a subject, is a field of science that if you want kids to be interested, if you want kids to find it fascinating and you know, you want it to be fun, you have to have a hands-on, you have to use the hands-on approach. That means you have to have your telescopes, you have to have your solar glasses, you know, all those teaching aids that the kids can see and touch and, you know, have interaction with. That way it's fun. But the problem is that we don't even have enough of this material. So it's always very difficult when you go, you know, when you want to teach them, you have a situation whereby a number of them will have to pair up to use the same or very few materials. In these pictures, we had teachers coming around because we found out that if we wanted to, you know, go by a school after one school after the other, it was going to take a long time and we will still not have reached a very minute portion of the kids. So we did the train the trainer workshop where we got teachers from schools. And unfortunately, because we didn't have enough materials, we had to give a kit, an astronomy kit to a school, one per school, and an average school has more than 200 pupils. Also, some of the things we do is to get a school to send representatives, you know, even when more than 200 of them are showing interest in astronomy, because we don't have enough materials, we don't have enough resources to go around. So we ask you to, you know what, can you send us just 2 science STEM students from your school, send us 3 or 5, you know, thereby making it impossible for everyone that would have loved to be there to participate. Also, astronomy is critically underfunded in Nigeria, with the average government funding being far less than 10,000 euros annually. That is crazy, and that is the truth. The government is not funding astronomy as it should be, and so it's a very big problem. For example, there's only one government-funded planetarium in the whole of Nigeria to a population of over 200 million people, and even the planetarium is yet to be fully operational. Yeah, these are challenges which, you know, are enormous, but as a group, we said we just needed to start from somewhere. We know we're not going to be able to solve all of this problem in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, but we wanted to start and make impact and you know, gradually get students to have access to astronomy one way or the other. So we started out by going on the street, you know, we have outreaches, you know, we have kids coming around. We go with our telescopes and we get them to look through the telescope, which is very, very exciting because many of them, in fact, almost all of them are seeing telescopes for the first time. And so it's always a very exciting thing to see them. Also, we make sure when there are global astronomical events, we join in, and then we use that as avenue to also talk to kids about astronomy. Yeah, that is what we do every time. We go to schools, we go to parks, we go on the streets. You know, we organize events where we are able to get as many as possible because there are just too many of students, of kids who are interested in astronomy, and we're never able to get them all involved. And also we have some of projects that have been supported by Office of Astronomy for Development, and these have been very helpful. We have the astronomy camp for the kids at the internally displaced people's camp. These are kids who have been displaced by insurgency in the northeastern part of Nigeria. And so we go to their camps. They live in refugee camps. So we go there, we make, we provide them with solar powered astronomy learning hub, which, you know, we have computer, we have internet access and all of that. There are over 300 IDP camps in Nigeria, and so far we've only been able to get to just 2 of them because there are just too many. In this camp, for example, they had over 300 young kids who showed interest in astronomy. We went with our telescope, we went with a group of counselors, and then because these are kids who have been traumatized by the insurgency that displaced them from their native communities. So we do this for them. And then recently we had the COVID-19 intervention for them, which was also partly funded by the OAD. And what we did is to create wash and stations for them. We have face masks, we have hand sanitizers for them. And then we are also able to interpret, to translate COVID-19 preventive measures into their local languages. Also, we have programs with girls, and every time we just don't have enough personnel to cater to this so many number of girls that are interested in astronomy. And this has been an ongoing thing we are doing, getting girls to be involved in astronomy. We also observe the, like I said, the global astronomical events like International Observe the Moon Night. We use those as avenue to talk to people on the street, in the parks, or in, you know, everywhere we can, you know, find people to gather them and to observe the moon or to stargaze. And so basically that is what we do. And so even though we have the problem with this lack of adequate facilities and infrastructure to teach astronomy as it should be taught, but because we don't even have enough kids being, you know, having access to astronomy, we just had to make do with the very minimum we can do. And the feedback has been very excellent. We've had statistics to show that children are more interested in astronomy. Schools have told us that the performances of students in STEM after their involvement with astronomy has been very excellent. And these are reasons why we keep going, even though it's a very, very, very long way to go, because to cater to millions of kids who are in school, in addition to 13.2 million who are out of school, in a country where astronomy is not being taught in school, it's enormous. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort that needs to be, you know, that we need to put in a lot of effort to see that many of these people, many of these children have access to astronomy. And then we are looking to see that they go on to study astronomy or astrophysics in tertiary institutions, and so they would in turn give back to the community by getting others interested in astronomy. Thank you very much.